Everyone, thanks so much for joining today. I can see that we've got a few people's audio that is still connecting, so I'm going to give it just 1 second. All right, it looks like we've got mostly everyone in here at the moment. So thanks so much for coming this week. We have our second of our three-part series all about career planning and career services. Today, Tiara de Guzman from Career Services is going to be chatting with us all about professional networking. And she is absolutely taking into account the fact that we are currently in a pandemic and we're still, networking in a highly virtual space. So she'll talk to you a little bit about that as well. So Tiara, you're welcome to take it away when you're ready.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I am back from last week. And like Marky said, today I'll be talking to you about networking. We'll talk more about virtual networking than usual, just because, once again, with the pandemic. But I'll also offer some tips for in-person networking once we get back there as well. So some learning objectives. I think one thing we don't usually talk about when it comes to networking is what I guess the importance of a digital brand identity, especially right now with everything being at home and with a lot of your networking taking place online. It's important to start to build up a brand identity. So we'll talk about what that is and how you can create one. And then we'll talk about some major platforms you can use to build and maintain connections, both online and in person. And once again, similar to last time, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat and I can address them as we go on, or you can unmute your mic and just start talking as well. Just be like, excuse me, and let me know. So starting off, I just want to talk briefly about branding, just because we'll talk a little bit about the importance of creating digital branding when you're networking online. So what is a brand? A brand is the way a company, organization, or individual is described or perceived by those who experience it. So the example I like to give, if I were to put up a Nike sign right now, you would automatically have some words that come to your head, such as just do it, and maybe some other words like exercise and things like that. And every time you see a different symbol, it sort of connects with some of these different words that come up. So that's one of the things that basically a brand is like anything that is associated with something else. A personal brand, though, is how you market yourself and has to do with you as an individual. So just like there are words that come up for certain organizations, there are also words that come up when somebody thinks of you as an individual, who you are, what you're good at, what you like. So when someone thinks of you, they may go, oh, I know that person loves cats. So that's automatically what I think of when I think of that person. Or they may go, that person is an engineering major and they're always they have a 4.0 and everybody knows that. So that would be a component of your brand. Okay, and so knowing that, we can sort of dive into what it would look like to create your own personal brand. So a lot of things around personal branding, or a lot of information around personal branding, especially virtually, starts off with creating accounts, right? So obviously social media, there are a lot of different places where you can start an account, make different connections, but there are some questions that you should ask yourself before making an account and before starting your digital brand. So the first thing you need to ask, especially when starting a new social media account, is will this be a personal or professional account? So a personal account, you can really do whatever you like. You can tweet whatever you like, post whatever you like, and not really be worried about it. But it's helpful to know that if it is a personal account and you don't want certain information from your personal account seeping into your professional life when you're Googled, making sure to have a different name and profile picture. So there are people I know who have like a Tumblr where they put like some moody poetry or something. If you have that, that's fine, but making sure to if you would like that to be associated with your career, then you can put your name up there. If you do not, then you need to choose a different name, choose a different picture. Try not to have like the same content across personal and professional platforms. If you're creating a professional platform, though, definitely a professional username. So no Skater Boy 4s or like anything like that. Make sure it's a professional derivation of your name, possibly like, so my name is Tiara de Guzman, so I would have Tiara de Guzman or Tiara D or T de Guzman, Tiara de Guzman 1, something like that, that sort of gives them an indicator that this isn't a professional account and not just like a personal thing. Be mindful of who you follow on a professional account. So if you have certain things that you don't want employers to know about you, or people who are networking with you, if you're like, yeah, like they don't necessarily need to know that I love chess outside of work, then make sure to like be mindful of who you follow whenever it's a professional account. So if you get like a LinkedIn, for instance, that's completely fine. You can follow whoever sort of fits with your field. But just being mindful of who you follow, especially on things like Instagram, because on Instagram, you can sort of go to someone's profile and see who they follow if you have a public profile. So just making sure that all of that information is okay. Post appropriate and relevant content. And then another thing to remember is LinkedIn is purely a professional platform. So if LinkedIn is a place where you would like to make connections, I would say that is the best place to make connections when you're job and internship searching and creating a career. Make sure that you are posting relevant content to your field and appropriate content. So LinkedIn is similar to Facebook, like it looks similar to Facebook, but that doesn't mean you should be posting like, just got back from a bubble tea hangout or something like that. Like LinkedIn is a professional platform where you are only posting content that has to do with your field. You can also post things that have to do with your own reflection on work or career or life path, or even self-care, mental health, if that's important to you too. But should never just be casual updates about you having fun unless it has to do directly with your field. Another thing to ask yourself when you're creating an account is, what are you hoping to achieve with your account, right? So if you're starting a new LinkedIn or a new Instagram, or you're getting even a new email, like that, a professional email, what are you hoping to achieve with that account? Often the answer can be multiple things, so it's okay if it's multiple things, but I think it's helpful to go into it having some idea of what you're hoping to achieve. So one of your things could be, I want to learn more about employers and what they need. So if that's your goal, maybe you get on Twitter and create a professional account so that you can follow a bunch of companies in your field and sort of see job postings they put up, see what their company values are, and sort of follow them just to information gather for an internship or a job search. You can use it to keep up to date on industry trends. So if I always say a great thing to do is on LinkedIn, you can follow companies and they'll come up in your feed with recent projects and things. It's really helpful to do that because one, recruiters are often in charge of those accounts. So if you follow them, they're going to see that you followed and be curious and come to your profile potentially. But also it's really helpful for when you get that interview. You can go in and say, yeah, I looked up your company and I follow you on LinkedIn. I saw you're coming out with this project. Can you tell me more about that? Right? So really good ways to information gather. Making new connections, which we'll talk more about. Finding jobs or internships is the obvious one for why you would maybe start a new account and start networking. To know what your competitors are doing. So this is one that we often don't think about. Competitors, by the way, does not have to mean something like mean or nasty in any way. Like just competition would be any of your peers who are also looking for jobs and internships. The reason why it's helpful to make connections with your peers and your competitors and sort of see what they're doing is because sometimes you'll get ideas for things you can do. So maybe you'll see, oh, I remember I had a group project with that person and now they work at Google. And that's really cool. So now you have that connection and you can reach out to them and ask them for advice or potentially a referral. Or sometimes you'll see somebody post and go, I applied for this scholarship or I applied for this summer program. And maybe it's something you could also apply for too. So it's helpful to sort of follow people as well and sort of see what kinds of opportunities are available. Another thing is that you can keep connections updated, which we'll talk a little bit about later. You can build brand credibility. So basically, when you meet someone in person, your credibility sometimes comes through your face, right? Because they're getting to know you. If you're in an interview capacity, you get to talk to them, you get to look at them, you get to shake their hand and get to know them. Often online, there's not the same level of connection. And so when you create profiles such as a LinkedIn or an Instagram or a Twitter, where you're focusing on your professional life, that is a great way of showing employers who you are and building brand credibility of like, these people follow me, these people respond to my posts. I continuously post different things that get people involved and engaged in our field. If you go to conferences and post about that, that's a good way of showing employers that you are dedicated to learning, things like that. So when you have an account, making sure that you are keeping it updated fairly frequently, which we'll talk about, because that is a good way to build that credibility and show employers online you are a consistent, interesting, and engaged person in your field. And lastly, it's also helpful to manage your reputation. So one of the things that you have to think about is that 76% of employers do Google you when you apply for a new job. And so you need to ask yourself, when they Google you, what's coming up? Is it appropriate content? Is it inappropriate content? Or is it irrelevant content? Like I know when you Google me, when I wasn't focusing my brand online, you often saw this video from high school where I was in musical theater, and it still comes up, but it's like lower on the list now because I have like my LinkedIn up and I have all these places where I've written articles and done different things and gone to conferences. So it's a good way to manage your reputation as well and show employers what you have to offer, what you've been doing that's relevant to your field. So you can sort of guide them to that information rather than letting them Google you and not see anything that's created specifically for your career. Another thing to consider, what platforms will you use? So there are a ton of different platforms for so many different things. These aren't all of them, of course, but one of the things to think about as you're creating a digital brand to start the process of networking is what places make the most sense for your field and for who you are as a person. So let's say you are interested in something like video games. The best place to do that and to sort of start to build up your brand and get information and start to network and make connections would be YouTube, because YouTube is known for that. There are a lot of different places that are known for that, but YouTube would be like a first great step. Twitter is a great place in general for all types of things. It's sort of a mishmash of a lot of things, but Twitter can be a great place where you start a profile where maybe like once a week you put up a different reflection, or once a day you put up a different tweet that sort of talks about you being a college student or what you're learning in your classes. TikTok is great for like music. Pinterest is great for arts and crafts. So different social media platforms have different things that they're associated with. The catch-all professional account would be LinkedIn, and that's what I would say you should mostly be using for networking, connection building. But these other places, if you're interested in any of these industries, exist too. So making sure to use these as well. And it's okay to have multiple platforms and multiple profiles. The only thing is that you want to make sure that you are being consistent across all of them. So on my personal profile or my personal website, you see my name, you see what I do, you see articles that sort of have to do with my position. And then if you look to my LinkedIn, it's the same thing. If you look at my Twitter, it's the same thing. Anything that is under my first and last name is all professional content that employers can use to look at my account. So asking yourself which platforms do you want to use is good as well. Another thing to think about is who are your influences? And so we'll talk about this in a second, even more in depth with networking. But I think often we don't think about like networking role models or anything, because that's something that people are just like, what does that mean? Or what does that have to do with? Oh, that's really funny. When your Pinterest is the fourth thing that comes up when you search your name. Yep. Maybe we can like add more content online so that your Pinterest is not the fourth thing, or put it under another name if you don't want employers to see that. But yeah, thank you for sharing that. But yeah, we often don't think about networking influences or anything like that, but there are a lot of people who we look up to, who we can sort of model both our brand identity and our networking style off of. So somebody that I really admire, she's over in the bottom right, is I love Lizzo. I think she's really fun. I think she's very bubbly. I love that she's here for body positivity and talking about, loving self-love and things like that. She is also really good at making connections in the industry, really great with marketing, very consistent with her brand. So when I think about Lizzo, I'm like, oh my gosh, she is a person who I think like is a really great representative of who I'd like to be when it comes to my social media platforms. Definitely very fun, very hopeful, very focused on mental health and self-love and body positivity as well. So asking yourself, who are your influences, right? Like who are the people that you think of when you when you think of your future self? And so you can do things as funny as like in the bottom left corner, we have like Ruffles, which put up this tweet recently, like when your roommate eats all the Ruffles, and it's like Arthur's hand from like the kids show Arthur. So is your brand funny? Is your brand serious? Like in the top to the left of the who are your influences sort of tab. Is your brand about charity and helping others? Is your brand focused on like the most recent dances and the fun things that people are doing online? So really asking yourself these questions. What does your brand look like online? Who would you like to emulate? And then eventually it'll turn into your own style. But just to get started, who inspires you? What kind of content do you want to actually produce? And so this is helpful to think about because the type of content you produce is going to connect with the types of connections you can make. So if you are on LinkedIn putting up you can do a lot of things on LinkedIn. You can put up written content where you just write like a reflection about a conference you went to. You can put up pictures of yourself, such as I just graduated, and you put up some pictures there to let both recruiters and your connections know I'm job searching, I just graduated, you know. You can put up short videos. You can put up webinars where you're teaching people about things. If it's Instagram, you can put up questionnaires and polls. So when it comes to you, what kind of content do you want to produce? What are you hoping to use to connect with people? Because we'll talk about the importance of people who can go to your profile and interact with your information. That is the best way to do virtual networking, right? When somebody likes and comments and shares your post, and when you also like and comment and share other people's posts. That's a great way to start making connections. And then lastly, I believe, second to lastly, who do you want to connect with? So when you're starting your networking journey, it's important to ask yourself, who are the people that you're actually trying to like meet and get to know? What industries are they in? What types of content do they produce? Are these people who are full-time professionals? Are they people who work freelance or contracted jobs? Are they people who you could potentially collaborate with? Or are they people who you see more of in a mentor or guide role? So asking yourself these questions before you even get started in the networking process is going to be important, because then you can sort of customize your list of like who you actually want to connect with and be intentional with that list. And then lastly, when will you post and how often will you post? So this is especially helpful for LinkedIn because people have all kinds of times that they're available and unavailable and things like that. So there are best times to post to social media to make connections and to get reactions to post and things like that. So I have those times listed, but also just for you, you should be asking yourself, like, what is feasible when it comes to how often you want to post? Like, can you post once a week? Can you post twice a week? And the reason why it's important to post is because, once again, people will react to and comment, like, and share your content. So it's important to make sure that, like, you're actually posting pretty regularly, especially when you're going through a full-time job search. You should be posting on your LinkedIn, like, at least once a week, something new, or you're sharing people's content because that's a good way to let them know, like, hey, like, I am a professional, I'm dedicated to my learning, and I also am interested in connecting with different people. So that is the first half of this presentation, which sort of centers on building a social media profile in general.
First half of this presentation.
Oh, sorry?
Are there even people there?
No.
Oh, I think so.
I was going to say, I think someone may have just accidentally unmuted.
Oh. No, that's okay. Okay. But yes, perfect. Okay, so going into the actual networking process, things that you should know. What is your end goal? What are you trying to get? Are you trying to get an internship, a job? Are you trying to get into grad school? Are you trying to find a mentor? Why are you networking to begin with? So starting there, what are some things you can offer to a networking connection? This is a really huge one. Often students feel like they have nothing to offer full-time staff members when they talk to them and network with them. But you offer information from your classes. You offer them the opportunity to network and mentor. You're often learning in your classes like the most recent technology and things like that. So you can also communicate that to the people you network with. So you're offering things, but networking is supposed to be a mutually beneficial relationship. So thinking about that beforehand. What kinds of connections would you like to make? Like we already went over. Are you looking for mentors? Are you looking for employers? Are you looking for potential collaborators, guides? What are you looking for? What is your networking style? This is actually, I sort of connect this to maybe like introversion and extroversion. Are you a quieter person who would be, or are you more shy and you would feel most comfortable connecting with people who you know first, as opposed to just cold reaching out to people you don't know? So have that information about yourself. Ask yourself what you feel most comfortable with and what your style is. And then as always, you should start off with who you already know. So we'll go into that in this next place. So there are 4 sort of tiers to networking, I like to think. The first is starting with who you know. So these are all of your friends, all of your professors, your parents, your family members, your people at your church or people at a camp you went to. These are all the people you know, right? So I think starting with this, it's important to remember, even if somebody is not in your field, that is still a person you know who may know somebody in your field, right? So don't just cut them off and be like, oh, but my parents don't even work in the industry, because you never know. They may know someone who has a connection somewhere where you'd like to work. So always start with who you know, start with those first round connections. Then connect with who they know. And when it comes to networking in the research, this often is the place spot of networking in some ways. The people who get jobs and internships and things like that typically don't get it because like their first round connection had something. They get it because their second round connection knew someone. So you don't get a job because your dad works at a company. You get a job because your dad knows someone who works at a company, if that makes sense. So connect with who they know. Who are the people you should be reaching out and letting everybody know, hi, I'm internship searching. I'm looking for mentors. I'm applying for grad school. I'm looking for full-time jobs. Tell everyone you know that you are job searching and looking, and then they can connect you with who they may know, somebody in the field. The third sort of circle in this networking is connecting with alumni and what I like to call affiliates. So of course, alumni are people who graduated from Illinois Tech recently or not so recently. They're just people who graduated from Illinois Tech at some point. Affiliates are people who you have some sort of connection with. So that can mean these are people who, let's say you're a part of Society of Women Engineers. These are people who didn't graduate from IIT, but at their own school were a part of Society of Women Engineers, if that makes sense. So it's people who have some sort of connection to something that you have. There will even be, I talk to international students who are like, yeah, like I know someone who works at Google. They didn't graduate from IIT, they went to another school, but we both grew up in the same really small hometown back home. And so that would be considered an affiliate. It's a person who you have a connection with through some type of affiliation or group or organization. And then lastly, after that, you connect with everyone else. So whenever you're starting your networking journey, make sure to start with who you know, then ask around and say, hey, does anybody know other people in my field from your first round connections? And then connect with alumni and affiliates, because that's like the next step. And then lastly, connect with everyone else. You never know. Sometimes you can reach out to people you have no connection with. I definitely did this when I was in college as well, where I was like, ooh, this person's really cool and does this job that I want. I don't have any connection to them, but let me just send them and ask if they'd still like to have a conversation and give me advice anyway. And the vast majority of people reached out. I can think of only maybe 4 people who didn't reach out when I very intentionally sent them for like an informational interview. So yeah, those are like the 4 sort of realms that you do that in. Networking tools you can use. Handshake is a great one that we use. You can use it not only for the appointments tab to sort of set up an appointment with us and get your networking journey in shape, but you can also use it for the events tab where we have employers come to campus all the time. We have career fairs through there that you can sign up for and meet people. We have different networking events that happen throughout the semester. So Handshake is one. The Bridge is another. The Bridge at IIT is basically our school LinkedIn. So it's like an alumni platform where alumni check in with current students and answer questions that they may have and connect with them. So you can use The Bridge. LinkedIn, of course, which we already talked about. Social media, virtual conferences. So doing something as simple as engineering conferences, Chicago area, engineering conferences, Midwest, right? Putting that into a Google search and sort of seeing what comes up. There are a lot of opportunities that will come up. Typing in networking events, looking for virtual things, especially right now when everything is virtual. So many things, so many new opportunities have opened up for you to go places without having to pay a ton of money and get in the car and drive somewhere new. So typing in virtual conferences, attending company workshops and presentations. So if you have a company that you're really passionate about, make sure to keep tabs on their company website because they may have an event coming up, such as a career fair or a branding workshop. Once again, companies are at home and a lot of people are at home, so they're looking for different ways to engage. Blitzer, which is sort of an event we do. We do this every now and again in career services where it's like a networking event. So make sure to look out for Blitzer. And then if you want some non-traditional ways to meet up with people, Eventbrite and meetups.com those are also great. So meetups.com has, Eventbrite has mostly like events, of course, for different career development needs. But meetups.com is really interesting because they have like young professionals in their 20s in Chicago, like those sorts of groups where you can meet people from a variety of fields and go to events such as like bowling nights and things like that. Of course, once again, right now everything is virtual, so you may have like a virtual like game night or virtual escape room or something where you just get to meet other professionals in the area while also making connections. And then lastly, in our networking journey, we want to talk about maintaining the connection, right? So often people make connections with people, but then don't know how to maintain those, and then they sort of lose the connection. So a few ways you can do that. Check back in. That's the most easy one. Like if you haven't talked to someone in a bit, you can check back in and just be like, hey, how have you been? I hope you've been well. I hope you're staying safe in the midst of this pandemic, right? Reach out to give them updates about your progress. So this is a huge one that I did while I was a student, especially when I was internship searching. As I got help from different people, I would reach back out every time I had a new update and just be like, hi, I hope you're doing well. I know it's been a month since we last talked. Just wanted to let you know that I officially accepted with this company. Thank you for your help throughout the process. Or you can say something like, just to let you know, I have an interview coming up. I'm curious, like, do you have any advice for this interview that I have coming up? Or would you be willing to send me the most commonly asked questions that you get asked or something like that? Share something of interest, an article, a link, something that has to do with your field, something that you talked about the last time you connected. I remember I talked to an employee about a book that we both liked. So when I reached back out, I was like, hey, I just did a reread of that book because I had just done a reread of that book. And that was a way that we rebuilt the connection after a bit. And then lastly, follow, comment, like their content on social media. I often think of it as like, on Facebook, you have all these high school friends that you like never talk to anymore. But the only way you know they exist is because you follow, comment, you like their pictures, you see their updates about life, and then you can sort of like it and reestablish that connection in some ways. So making sure to do that as well. Comment, like on people's media, especially on LinkedIn with somebody that you've been connected with in the past. When they upload something, make sure to comment, congrats, or this is awesome. I really enjoy this article you wrote. congrats on that conference attendance, things like that. And then lastly, I feel like I flew through, but we are exactly at 1:20. Lastly, keep it consistent, right? So if you decide to post once a week, actually post once a week. Don't like fall off the face of the earth for a few weeks just because, it's not always great. So keep it consistent. Ask yourself what is doable and then go with that. Know who inspires you and who you take influence from. Focus on being as engaging as possible, specifically on social media when you're doing your own digital branding. Be intentional with your content and with your goals. So only post things that really feel like they're in alignment with your values and that they are going to help you get to your next step. Make and maintain meaningful connections. So don't just make the connection and forget about them. Go back and maintain the connection by checking in, asking how they're doing, and then liking, following their content on social media. And then lastly, do your research. What are the things that are needed in your field? How can you get those skills and experiences? Who are the people that you want to connect with, and how can you sort of make those connections using LinkedIn and Handshake and The Bridge and all of the resources available to you. So perfect. So that is my presentation. I talked like a lot, and we needed to squeeze a lot into a little bit of time. But if you have any questions, as always, I'll put my email in the chat, but as well, you can also ask questions and I'll stick around if you have any additional ones.
All right. Thank you so much, Tiara. I very much appreciate it. Everyone, in terms of announcements, just keep in mind that Tiara is going to be back with us again next week to finish up this series all about career services. And I believe the focus of next week is really on resume building. And so this is a really important one because this is something that you can start doing as a first-year student and really building that resume throughout your undergraduate experience. So join us next Tuesday from 12:50 to 1:20 for that. And then after that, we only have one more week of first-year seminars left, and the very last seminar will be all about financial literacy. And so we are winding down for the year. And yes, Lucy, you can definitely stay after. All right, my friends. So if you are ready to go and have other places to be, you are welcome to